Alright, so 2 months late, but I guess better late than never. Welcome back to another episode of Midlifers. I'm Prashanna. We finally got our hands on the lomo'instant white glass. It's a fantastic camera. I've been shooting it for a while now. So let's go run it through its paces and I'm going to share my experiences with you. Alright, so quite a few instant white cameras have been released and the lomo'instant white glass was highly anticipated. As its name suggests, it comes with a 90mm glass lens made by Lomo. It's roughly equivalent to a 35mm lens. Of course, the way to focus this camera is the same as its predecessor. You would use the zone focus here. The shutter button is always located at the front here, same as its predecessor, and you have these removable viewfinders. It comes with a flash. Of course, it has a tripod socket at the bottom. If you want to use external flash, it has a PC sync port there. And then if you want to trigger it remotely, you have this handy dandy lens cover that activates via infrared, and you can activate the camera from far away, or if you don't want to introduce any camera shake. You can switch the flash off if you want to by overriding it here. You can do multiple exposures through this button here. If, let's say, you find the camera not exposing accurately in automatic mode, you can of course exposure compensate by plus or minus 1. This is actually the lever to switch off the camera, or you can switch it to automatic mode, bulb mode, or you want to manually override to f22 and or shoot at 1/30th of a second. The unique features about this camera is actually the fact that it has a glass lens. You can actually do some macro shots by shooting at 0.3 meters. And last but not least, you finally have this override to shoot at f22 if you want to have that great depth of field. So that's things you won't find in its predecessor. Okay, so we're out here in the sun, but it's overcast weather, so I'm not sure shooting color film is a wise decision again. But we do it for the gram. So loading the camera is very simple, just like any other Instax camera. You just align the yellow markers there, you press it in. The nice thing is it doesn't auto-eject the slide, so I'm just going to switch off the flash and I'm going to push the trigger and we're going to eject the dark slide. Using this camera is very simple. Just like any large format camera, you should go through a dance. Personally, I'm not a fan of the fact that it automatically switches on the flash each time you switch on the camera. And this is a viewfinder camera, so don't leave the lens cap there. Always take it off. Always, once you switch on the camera, switch off the flash and we should be good to go. So let's go. Do you want to look through the lens, the viewfinder? Alright, so this viewfinder isn't very easy to use. The fact that it's removable also doesn't really suggest that it is quite useful because there's no add-on lens attachments for this camera. You'll notice that one grid line and then there's this part that is shaded. So I believe the grid line references the actual dimensions you're going to capture when you're shooting at from 1 meter to infinity. But anything closer than that, you should actually follow the lighter area. The darkness in this viewfinder is not really very pleasant to use, so I found it quite hard to use. Not really a fan of it, but it does its job. You can use it. So I'm going to take a shot of this colorful benches and we're going to see what we capture. Okay, so I'm just using it like a zone focus camera. I'm not really aiming, I'm just guessing the composition. I'm at infinity, so I think it should be quite safe. I was trying to capture the reflections and the people walking across. So let's, I think Ian will load up the picture. We see whether that was a success or a great failure. Okay, so we're going to do a distortion test. We have these straight lines here. And we're going to just take a photo of it and see whether there's any distortion in the glass elements. So within the viewfinder, there's a bit of barrel distortion, but let's see what the actual glass produces. All right, so using the camera is quite simple, but there's this dance you have to do every time. You have to always remember to remove the lens cap because it's a viewfinder camera, so if you leave it there, you're going to have blanks. The next thing you have to remember is actually to switch off the flash. I hate it when you have to always manually override it, but that's how this camera works. And the last thing you must remember to do is to check your distance, whether you're at the right distance. Once you've done those three things, you can more or less take the image as and how you want to. So I'm going to switch off the thing. I'm at infinity, and I'm going to take a picture of this boat here. Okay. So we're going to test out the multi-exposure settings. I just switched on the camera. I'm going to remove the lens cap. I'm going to... No, unpress is to take out. Shit, man. Huh? No. Let's just... Okay, this is the third time we're doing this, and I hope I get it right. So we're going to do the multiple exposures on one image. How you do that is very simple. You're just going to click on the multiple exposure button, okay? That enables you to take multiple exposures without the film being ejected out. I'm going to take a photo of Ian right now against the overcast light so that we have a silhouette of him, and then I'm going to overlay another image on it. We're going to use these flowers right here. Okay, so I'm going to take the first image first. So Ian, get into position. Okay, so I've taken my first image. We're still in the multiple exposure mode. I'm going to overlay the flowers here.
See, do not press the button.
Okay, don't press the multiple exposure button yet. Okay, we're just going to take a shot of the colorful flowers. Okay, once I'm done and I'm happy, I'm going to now click the multiple exposure button again, and that will eject the film. So that's how you do it. Don't end up wasting 3 or 4 shots just like what we did, okay? We've done this multiple times, but we still fuck it up. Okay, so we're gonna use this shutter release cable that's built into the lens cap, so I don't think you can really call it a shutter release cable. It uses infrared. There's actually a battery inside the lens cap here. So when you fire it, just make sure that the infrared signal actually can reach this receiver here. We've angled the camera such that more or less we can see our reflections within the glass elements, and we're going to attempt to take a selfie together. So let's do that now. All right, so this is some analog photography vibes right here. I see a tab. It looks like it has the vibes. So I'm going to take a macro image of it using this camera. I'm going to switch it to 0.3 meter, so you can see that for yourself here. I'm going to switch on the flash as well, so that we have enough light and it differs to the f22 if possible. And then I'm going to estimate 30 cm to the film plane. The problem is the viewfinder is no longer useful, so I'm just going to look at the lens from a few different directions, and I think I'm about there. So I'm going to just take this shot and hope for the best. Okay, we'll know in a while whether this works. So this is a problem with the viewfinder. You don't have like a special attachment to make yourself have an easier time to actually shoot macro images, but that's one of the features of this glass camera. So let's grab a beer, take a while, let the film develop, and then let's talk through them with you. All right, so it's another day. We're $1 short. We spent all our money on shooting in stacks, as you can see. But I guess you guys are all very curious to see the images, whether this glass lens is really as good as it is purported to be. So when we look at the images, I guess I'm pleasantly surprised. The images are sharp. When you nail focus, it is a zone focus camera, mind you. So once you nail focus correctly, the images are super sharp. So we took some photos along Vivo City. This is one of the first ones we took. I think you would have, Ian would have posted it earlier on. We did a reflection. We tried to capture the people at the back. Of course, the viewfinder is a little bit off, given that it's a viewfinder camera. Naturally, that is to be expected. The camera does tend to expose a little bit too dark for my liking. So some of the images, you'll notice they look kind of dark. Okay, when you look at them, you might benefit from actually putting EV compensation to +1. We did some casual fun time shots with our friends, a guy who, Clarence, shout out to Clarence, okay? He took a photo of this, Ian and Uncle Chong. This was very impromptu. I think any beginner can shoot this camera as long as they understand or can estimate distances with an accurate degree. I think you would have seen our bloopers on the multiple exposure. So we had some bloopers because I forgot how to use it. But once we nailed it, it looks kind of nice. But same thing again, it suffers from the same issue as I mentioned earlier. It does suffer from tending to underexpose a little. I do wish that the exposure compensations were maybe not in +1 stops. Maybe if we could fine tune it by +1/3 or half a stop, I think that would have been better. We did try the infrared shutter release, and the funny thing is we actually switched on the flash for this shot. Even though it's a very contrasty scene, we completely turned out black. So I think the flash might not be as powerful as needed for such images, but when you take macro images, the flash seems quite adequate. We did shoot some photos of the scenery around, the boats and all that. This was shot through glass, it looks okay. This camera is not an autofocus camera, so I don't expect it to make mistakes here. When you do compensate with the exposure compensation to +1, the images do turn up pretty good. So personally, I prefer shooting everything at +1 just to be on the safer side. This camera, compared to its non-glass predecessor, has a 0.3 meter macro mode. But the thing is, we had a bit of difficulty actually ironing out what's the distance you should shoot from. After few trial and errors, we did realize that you shouldn't measure to the film plane, you should actually measure to the glass element. So just make sure your subject is about 30 cm away from the glass element and you should be more or less there. Composition in this mode is extremely difficult, so I wouldn't suggest using the viewfinder. Rather, what I personally like to do is I just like to look and make sure my subject is head on, and I've basically positioned the subject within the camera lens barrel area. Ian took a photo of us, it looks okay. We did actually like a distortion test, a very rudimentary one. I think the glass lens is quite sharp H to H, but this is Instax, so perhaps it isn't something we should be worried about. When you look at this image on your screens, you might notice some wavy bands, but the film itself is actually folded. So I guess within the cartridge, it must have been damaged or it must have picked up some bending, and that's why it looks a bit wavy. But otherwise, I would say the lens is pretty sharp when you really do nail focus. This was our attempt at the tap, truly artistic, out of focus, just like how wedding photographers take their photos nowadays. So this is the mistake we made early on. We tried to focus the subject to where we thought the film plane was, which isn't how you should shoot it. You should shoot it with the front element in mind. I do wish that Lomography had, like Pentax, made a strap that is the correct distance so that it would make it easier for you to take your macro images. Here is one we just took. It's of the flowers that was here on the table just now. So this came up pretty nice. I'm very happy with it. And these were I guess the reviews of the color photos. I actually went out and I shot some images on monochrome. On monochrome, the slight underexposure seems to look a lot better. So even in contrasty scenes like this, it adds a nice silhouette to your landscapes. It looks beautiful. And if you can like overexpose it, maybe one stop, it will look even better. When you do macro images with this camera, the fact that everything is underexposed, and if you use a flash to illuminate your subject, it will actually like create some background separation that you might actually like. So this is a flower that I took. When I went out and took photos, I took photos of my wife and my kid. So this is also +1 overexposure. And with that, I think it came out to a nice exposure. This is the kid. So zone focusing, as long as you get it right, it will look amazing. And in monochrome, even a slight underexposure will have very, very nice tones to it, very beautiful images. Just like any Instax wide camera, I think you guys will probably like using it. In this case, I did have problems with its macro mode. There were 1 or 2 times when I placed the camera in the bag, I forgot to switch it off. When I forgot to switch it off, it accidentally ejected a frame or 2. So we did have that issue. So just remember, when you do use this camera, get into that dance, as I was saying. Get into the habit of actually switching on the camera, switching off the flash. I do wish the flash, you had an option to leave it switched off or on. So maybe a toggle switch such that when you switch on the camera, the toggle switch will actually determine whether the flash is always switched on or switched off. Would be nice to actually, for those advanced photographers. For beginners, I think leaving the flash on would be good. But given that the flash wasn't too bright, I don't know whether it's actually very, very useful. It does have a few other modes like f22 if you want to force down the aperture, might be good for actually taking landscape shots. It does have a 1/30th second mode. I guess if you're going to use strobes like what we have today here inside the studio, then that would be amazing as well. Other than that, it's actually quite a fun camera. It is sharp when you do nail focus. I'm of the opinion that maybe zone focus cameras aren't really suited for glass elements, especially from the Lomography line. But I guess the proof in the pudding will be when we actually compare it to the non-glass variant, and then we can compare A and B testing of the same imagery and see which lens is actually sharper or whether they're the same. If you like this review, I think you probably will like our review of the lomo'instant mini glass. So you probably can check it out after this. If not, then this is Prash signing off from the Midlifers. I hope you really enjoyed this video. And if you have any questions about this camera, drop it down below. I'll be more than happy to answer them if I can, you know. So if you love this episode, please remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next episode of Midlifers.